back to Storytime with Captain Xavier. I am Chaylo Laurino and I play Captain Xavier here on YouTube and in the Nerf world and on video games and years ago in medieval recreation. And the story that you have voted to hear today is another one of the stories from my medieval recreation days, of which I still have many. I did it for many, many years and had a lot of adventures. Today we're going to be hearing the story of the Second Holy War. Now, wars in Adria were an important and variable thing. They were generally our biggest events. We would have a couple of them a year. They'd be a weekend-long camping event, usually done over a holiday weekend, so they could, they go from Friday to Monday. They were big events, and there was a lot that went on. There were tournaments, there were large-scale battles, there was feasts and dancing, and all sorts of stuff happened at these events. And they generally drew the most people. The monthly tournaments that we had were generally much smaller, and if you had to choose what event you would go to, you went to one of those. It was kind of the equivalent of like End War or West vs. Zombies or Ragnarok Oktoberfest. It was a big event that drew a lot of people from the hobby. They were also how we chose our leaders, assuming that more than one person wanted to run to become leader. They were how we ran our elections. If only one person was running, they were running uncontested, then we would have what was just referred to as a fun war, where we just divide the sides up evenly and just have a battle. And we'd still have the tournaments and the feasts and the field battles and all of that, but we wouldn't actually be fighting over anything specific. And those can be a lot of fun, because there's no, there isn't any emotion caught up in it as much. You're not worried about, well, if we lose and the other guy's going to get to power and it's going to be bad, as opposed to just attack and bah! Oh, we lost. Oh, the worst. All right, switch teams. Let's try it again. So fun wars could be, as the name would imply, a lot of fun. But in our subdivision, we liked having a story behind the war. They weren't necessary, and they were generally still something that was just silly and just thrown together just so we'd have something to yell at each other on the battlefield, and we could interact on the discussion boards and get all hyped up for the war, and we found it to be more enjoyable. You may notice, I'm into the theater of things, the pageantry, the storyline, the whole, Captain Xavier thing. When we go to End War and we're all in gear and marching about and all of that. That's all pomp and circumstance and as the result of being an old theater ponce. That was very much something that was still the case back in my Adria days. We enjoyed the game, because if you're going to be pretending to be a 15th century French nobleman, you might as well get into it. Otherwise, once again, you're just robbing yourself of fun unnecessarily. So we liked to have stories behind our wars, even when they were fun wars. That's why we had things like the War of Two Nights and the War of the Chains and all of those wars that had stories behind them. And so the Second Holy War was no exception. We wanted to have a war because we were allowed to have so many a year, and we wanted to make sure we had as many as we could so that we could get all the points. Because you had to, in order to get knighthoods, the knighthoods were all point-based, you had to participate in a certain number of wars. Either doing, fighting in field battles or archery tournaments or what have you. You had to have a certain number of war experience in order to get your knighthoods. And so we tried to get as many wars in as we could. I think there was a limit to how many you could have in a year, or a lot of it was just practicality. We only had so many weekends that were going to be free, and we only had so much money to reserve spaces and stuff like that, because they did require a large space. This particular war, the Second Holy War, was a single-day war. We didn't end up doing a camp out. We rented out, or we were able to reserve a school in Pullman. And they had a large field that we could have our battles in, and they had indoor rooms that we could have our feast in and all of that. And so it worked out very well, and it wasn't expensive because it was a public building. But we needed to have a story. And our go-to whenever we had a war that didn't have any other story behind it was a holy war. And that may not have aged as well as it could have, but it wasn't actually based on real-world religion. I mean, we could have, because we had people who were pagan characters and people who were nominally Christian characters, and we could have had them fight it out, but that wasn't how it ever ended up happening. Within Adria, there was what was simply referred to as the Church of Adria, and that was the overarching entity for anybody who wanted to do anything religious. You could do real-world religious stuff if you wanted to research ancient Christian rites, or ancient pagan rites, or ancient Muslim rites, or whatever you wanted to study, whatever, if you wanted your character to be a cleric of some kind, you know, a priest or a shaman or what have you, whatever religion you chose, whatever you were doing, you were Church of Adria. You could also have something that was completely neutral. There was just the church that was the Church of Adria, that was just non-denominational religious-y stuff. And that was fine as well, because, you know, they did do a lot of, you know, religion was obviously a huge and important part of medieval history. And so they did do a lot of pomp and circumstance, and coronations were typically done by a member of the church. But it was, again, non-denominational. It could be completely non-denominational. Whereas, like I said, you could have an actual historical-based character on a historic religion. But there was also another entity within Adria called the Church of St. Warhammer that existed for one purpose and one purpose only, and that was to make war on the Church of Adria. And that was all silly and fun and goofy, and if you want to know more about that, watch the story of the First Holy War, because that one was fought between the Church of Adria and the Church of Warhammer, and was at the time the only war that Warhammer had ever won against the Church. The Second Holy War was actually fought between two members of the Church of Adria. Bishop Guillaume Marchand de Fleur, who is still one of my favorite people I have ever known in my life, and Brother Liam of Band La Luna, who you may recall was the one who hired the crew in the War of the Mercenaries. There were many shenanigans were had between me and Liam, and with Liam as well. Fun guy to play with. And I don't remember how it got started exactly. We knew there was going to be a holy war. We were looking for a reason, and somehow these two guys came up with an idea, and they were fighting over a relic. And the relic was the sword of Alexander Christian. You know, Alexander Christian was the founder of Clan MacLean from way back early on in Adria. He was at the time the best fighter, and he trained me to an extent, and he founded the household of Clan MacLean. And he was very much a paladin-ish character. He was, you know, I don't think he was actually officially Church of Adria. Oh, he may have been. Clan MacLean ended up fighting against the Church of Adria in the First Holy War. They ended up siding with Warhammer because of a broken promise by Brother Robin, who was leading the war in the first one. And so he was, I don't know if he was excommunicated or what exactly the storyline was with Alexander Christian, but they had a sword. It was a shinai, just a bamboo, you know, kendo stick, because that's what our light combat was fought with, and we hadn't gotten to heavier combat at this point. This was one of the earlier wars that we fought in. It was like the third year I was in or something. I believe it was during the reign of Dame Amara and Sir Mikos. But that was the relic, his sword. He had long since left the group for reasons. I think he graduated college and went on with his life. So he wasn't still in the game. He had disappeared at least a year, maybe 2 years before. And so this was all, you know, made up, the sword of Alexander Christian. It might have actually been his shinai. I don't remember. But it was declared a relic, and it was gussied up, it was made pretty and given a cross guard and a bunch of other things, and it was made to be this relic, very Excalibur-esque. And so that's what the war was being fought over. And so there was banter back and forth between Brother Liam and the bishop, and all of this talk, and somehow Liam, either he had it, or he made a claim to it, or the bishop had it, and Liam made, I don't remember how the war came about, but that was what we were fighting over, was this relic. And so the battle scenario was, there were a number of battle scenarios, but the main one, the big one that really revolved around the story, and that was the thing we liked to do. That was one of the reasons we liked having a story, was we could then tailor the battles, the scenarios, to fit that story, and it made for much more interesting and robust and creative battles. In a lot of ways, as opposed to two sides line up and they fight. Okay, we have a narrow bridge. We do a bridge battle and they line up and they fight. We were able to do something much more creative. And in this one, you were battling over the sword itself. It started out in the middle of the battlefield, and the ultimate goal was to get it to your side of the field, but quests. I don't know how you would really describe it. Once you had the sword, you then had to go to location B and do something there while being attacked, and if you were able to hold that location, then you could go to location C, and then you had to do something while the other side continued to attack you, and if you succeeded that, then you finally got back to your final location, and you simply had to hold it from one last wave. It was a multiple resurrection battle, so everyone had lots of lives. But if you failed in one of those objectives, then the object moved back a pace. And so it went back and forth a couple of times where one side got it and they got to location B, but they lost location B, and so the other side got it and they got to go to their location B, and then they lost it, and then I think we got to C and then lost it, but we were able to get it back, and then we finally got it back and we held it. I fought for the bishop because he was French and a very good friend of mine, and so I fought for him. He also had more resources than Liam did, Liam being a poor college student and Guillaume being an adult with like a professional job and stuff. And so he was able to offer more for my services, which was something like a case of root beer and a Chennai or something like that. I was cheap back then. I was a penniless college student, so I was real easy to buy. So, yeah. But we were able to win. We were able to get it off the field. I believe Sergeant Kyle was on my side. Supposedly he got there. There were some shenaniganery concerning the rules, but we were able to pull out the victory. And so the bishop had the sword, and Liam's claim was renounced, and all of that. And then we retired, and there was feasting, and there was gaming, and there may have been dancing. I don't know that group was big on the dancing. It was more dancing in Avalon, and I liked the dancing. I really enjoyed medieval-style dancing, the noble dancing, and the peasant dancing, and all of that. I would go on to do a lot of dancing in my life. It's been far too long since I've danced. I did get to see one thing that was just really, really cool, which was Sir Hamish, who... He is the one who taught me the word schmuck, though I have recently been informed that schmuck is not, in fact, the correct term for where I've been using it. The word schlemiel would be more accurate, and I have used that term as well, but I used schmuck more commonly. Apparently it is, in fact, a dirty word, which I did actually know. Yeah. Anyway, this was the first time where Hamish had really finally gotten into character. Before he showed up in, sweatpants and shoes and had a vaguely medievally shirt, but really hadn't gone to the nines. Really created a Scottish laird character, if you will. And this time he did. And the first time I saw him at the event, I'd already been there, I'd gotten my gear on, we were getting set up for the war, and he rolls in out of an elevator, I think. So the doors opened up, and there he was. I had made him a gift. I had made him a beret, a leather beret out of scrap leather that I had, and it actually came out looking really, really cool. And he put a brooch on it, and he had an actual wolf pelt over his shoulders, and a proper doublet, and a full green flowing cloak, and an actual proper great kilt, though, yes, we know they're not historically accurate, but, what are you going to do? His broadsword, he'd actually finally gotten proper boots, medieval boots. And it was just really cool to see him get into that. And he looked like a proper Scottish lord. And it was really, really cool. So, yeah, that was a neat event. I remember the feast was good. They cooked such good food. Simple, feasty food, chicken and stuff like that. And lots of gaming, lots of Hazard, and I think there was some Tablero, and we played a lot of old medieval games. We had board games that we'd play, and dicing games and all of that. So, yeah, the Second Holy War was an excellent example of a fun war done right, in my opinion, where there was a good story behind it, but at the end of the day, it didn't really matter. Crowns were not changing places, and, there were no hard feelings and all of that, because it was all done in fun and silliness. And that was really that was the golden age of our game, I feel, was when we were just getting together to have fun before we got into the politics. Though when we did finally do it, did we do it well. So that was the Second Holy War. Stories for next time. I'm going to continue to put Captain Xavier learns about art and the origins of the kitty pike block. And for the third story, the time the crew betrayed the humans. Another time the crew betrayed the humans at WSU's HVZ. That was a fun mission that we had. Good times. I'm sure. I'll have to ask Sergeant Lance, Sergeant Deplorable, and Crewman Rocket what they remember of that event, because I'm pretty sure they were both involved, and their perspective was probably very different than ours. Because we kind of played the villains for that whole game, on and off and on. They never knew where we were coming from, which was the goal. So that would be a fun one. But also, Captain Xavier learning about art from my younger brother, Alefanzio. It's not his actual name, but that's what I'm going to call him on here. And the other one, the pike block. Someday I will tell the story of how the crew learned to march with pike and shot, and where all the shenaniganery that came from that. So, vote, survey will be down in the description. Thank you guys for watching.